Hello and welcome to your first appointment for bioidentical hormones. And we're going to go over some of the common questions, the most commonly asked questions that is. And the first most common question, what are they? Well, bioidentical hormones are simply the hormones that exist in your body without alteration. So for instance, a woman has estradiol. Coincidentally, so does a man. But estradiol is estradiol. A synthetic form that you would find in a pharmacy would be ethinyl estradiol, marketed under the name Ogen. Another example is testosterone. Well, men and women both have testosterone. A commercially available form of it would be methyl testosterone or testosterone cypionate. The reason they do this is because they have to be alterations of our own hormones before they can achieve a patent, because you can't patent a body's own substance, its own endogenous substance. You must alter it in some fashion so then it can become quote-unquote a drug, which is a substance that is not native to our bodies. Once they do that, they can patent it and make a bunch of money on it. The next most common question, what are they made from? Well, in reality, they happen to be made from either soy or yam. These two plants are used simply because they most closely mimic cholesterol, which is what these hormones are made from in your body. And it only takes a very few manipulations to turn them into the hormones that we desire. That being said, that is not what I consider them to be natural from. Many people do. They say, hey, it's from a plant source, it's natural. My argument would be cyanide is from a plant source and it'll kill you. So what makes it natural to me is that atom for atom, bond for bond, molecule for molecule, it is identical under a microscope. It doesn't matter to me what the source is, cow manure, cement, whatever, as long as it's the exact same molecule, to me it fits the definition of natural. Why aren't they available commercially? Well, I think we already talked about that. That's simply because they cannot profit from it. If they can't patent it, they can't profit from it. How are they different from regular hormones? Well, we went over that too. They're unadulterated hormones in their natural state. They're not turned into weird and strange drug forms like Premarin, which is derived from pregnant horses' urine, or medroxyprogesterone instead of progesterone. The biggest weapon the FDA tries to use against us is they're not FDA approved. Well, that is in fact technically true. But the reason for that is no substance made in a pharmacy can be FDA approved, simply because the FDA does not oversee the act of pharmacy. They oversee manufacturing. However, what they don't tell you is that every hormone that we make for you is made from an FDA approved facility. It's an FDA approved drug, and when we combine them in the pharmacy, they're made from ingredients that are all FDA approved. The only part of it that's not FDA approved is when we put them together, because that is not a function of the FDA. Another question that we get is, how long will it take for my symptoms to go away? And this is a tricky one. It's different for every woman. It depends on whether you're in perimenopause or menopause. But typically, hot flashes are the first symptom to subside. Secondly, you start to see night sweats go away, things like that. Then you get into insomnia improves, mood swings improve. The very last thing to improve, typically, especially for women, is libido issues. And that's because women, I hate to say it, are a little more complex than men. It takes, women have to be have everything else okay before that becomes okay. So if she's having hot flashes, she's really not in a sexual state of mind. If she's having night sweats, that's not going to work either. So it's our job to make sure all of the symptoms go away, and then we can all move on from there. Okay, more questions. Do they cause cancer? Nobody can answer that one way or the other. But what we can say is that there was a study done called the Women's Health Initiative, and they go back to it and they quote it all the time. And they say estrogen caused cancer. Well, no. Premarin caused cancer in that study, not estrogen. It's ridiculous that they can just blanketly call that estrogen. That'd be like calling Wellbutrin causes cancer because Prozac did. Well, they're two totally different drugs, as Premarin and estradiol are two totally different drugs. This all being said, there was a group of people that got together and looked at a certain wing of this study where there were estradiol and prometrium, which is progesterone, and it is a natural bioidentical hormone. And when they regrouped it, they found that cancer risks not only usually stay the same or went down in this group of people. Does that prove that they don't cause cancer? No. Another interesting note is the average onset of breast cancer in women is in their 60s. And at that age, women don't have any hormones. Their hormones are gone, and what little estrogen they produce is produced from the adrenal gland. So if it would be just as valid to say that breast cancer was caused from the lack of hormones, if you really wanted to argue hormones one way or the other. Another question is, are there any studies? There's the one that I just mentioned, how they regrouped it. There are a few studies out there that are very positive. You won't see many studies, and that's because drug companies are the ones that sponsor the studies. And they're not likely to sponsor a study on a substance that is in direct competition with what they make. And we've already talked about the Women's Health Initiative. Okay, natural versus unnatural. Bioidentical, estradiol, you see that on your left. And then you can look at Premarin. And what you don't really see clearly on the bottom left-hand corner is a sulfur group, a double bond to oxygen, double bond to oxygen, and so on and so forth. And that is all derived from, like I said, pregnant mare's urine. And next we go down to natural progesterone. And then we look at medroxyprogesterone. And then we look at testosterone cypionate, which has this big, long, what we call an ester hooked on to it. And then here we have plain testosterone. So anyone can see the difference. It doesn't take a genius to see that this is not the same as this. Why they get away with saying estrogen is estrogen and progesterone is progesterone is baffling to me. Because the truth is estrogen, but estrogen is estradiol, estrogen is estrone, estrogen is estriol, estrogen is not medroxyprogesterone, estrogen is not conjugated estrogens, estrogen is not ethinyl estradiol. There's a big difference, and they'll never tell you that. Perimenopause. This is the very first stage of menopause in women, and it's when they really start to come in and see us. And here's the big 3 reasons why. Number 1, I can't sleep. Number 2, I'm moody. Number 3, I've gained 10 pounds and I don't know why. And the I've gained 10 pounds and don't know why is usually first on that list, not second or third. The reason this happens is because the very first hormone to go away in perimenopause is progesterone. And progesterone does wonderful things. The first thing it does is it elevates a sedative neurotransmitter called GABA. And when you have plenty of GABA, you have a calm sense of self, sense of being, and it also helps you with the induction of sleep. So you can see how mood swings get better and how sleep is more enabled with progesterone. Because it does these wonderful things. The other thing that progesterone will do, and it's not mentioned there, is progesterone elevates serotonin, which almost everyone's familiar with now because of Prozac, and it's an SSRI, or an antidepressant, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Well, progesterone elevates serotonin, which also tends to cause some drowsiness and helps with sleep, not to mention depression. And depression is a very big symptom of perimenopause. Now, it's a little more complex, but gaining the weight is typically from this mechanism. When progesterone drops, the amount of free estrogen relative to your progesterone increases. Well, when you have a bunch of estrogen circulating around and not much progesterone, you tend to make something in your body called TBG, or thyroid binding globulin. Well, thyroid binding globulin does exactly what you think it would do. It binds up active thyroid and takes it out. So therefore, that has a slowing effect on the metabolism. And once you take some thyroid out and you gain some weight, unfortunately, in your fat cells, there's a little estrogen factory made from something called aromatase, which is an enzyme. The more fat you have, the more aromatase you make. The more aromatase you make, the more fat you have. And it starts a spiral. And the reason this is relevant is every woman will tell you, I gained 5 pounds, but then after that, the next 5 were faster, and the next 5 were even faster. And it's a big, huge spiral. Well, there's a very definitive hormonal reason for that. And we've kind of cleared this. Progesterone and what it does, mood swings, insomnia, and weight gain. And we've cleared or talked about all of those for you. Okay, good. This is another good one. Other signs of progesterone deficiency. We talked about depression. Migraine headaches. This is a big one. And migraines that happen specifically around menstruation are usually attributable to progesterone. So it's very important to map. If you have migraine headaches or just tend to have headaches throughout the month, it's very important to map when they are occurring, because we can kind of tie in which hormone may be responsible. A lack of progesterone or sporadic spurts of progesterone can cause menses or spotting at different times. And we talked about how it slows down your metabolism as well. Okay, some other hormones and what they do in the body. Estradiol. A lack of estradiol will cause hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, and bone resorption, which means bone loss. Testosterone. Low libido, low energy, bone loss, loss of muscle tone. All of those. The next two are very important adrenal hormones. Pregnenolone is the mother hormone because it's the hormone that all other hormones are made from. In your body, it starts with cholesterol, and then the next thing made is pregnenolone. So deficiency in pregnenolone can cause a lack of mental acuity, kind of a fogginess in the brain. It can also cause an elevation in LDL, or cholesterol, which when you think about it really makes sense. When your body loses the ability to convert cholesterol to pregnenolone or to hormones, then what happens is your body keeps making cholesterol in a futile attempt to make hormones. And so you end up with more and more cholesterol. And that's why people's cholesterols climb as they age. Mainstream medicine hasn't figured this out yet, but I imagine they will in the next 20 years or so. Next is DHEA, and it's an interesting hormone because it was the very first hormone that they used in anti-aging medicine. And the reason for this is because they found that any disease state, whether it was a tumor, renal failure, anything, you name it, was accompanied by a low level of DHEA. So the reverse logic was used, and we thought, well, hey, if we supplement DHEA, maybe these other disease states won't happen. Well, that was not the outcome, of course. But we did find some other great things from DHEA. One, it is a wonderful mood elevator. People tend to have a sense of well-being that's missing when you add it in. It is a fantastic treatment for dry eye syndrome. Do not go take any of the eye drops that you see that are advertised that suppress your immune system and so on and so forth before you have tried DHEA. I myself have dry eyes. I take DHEA. It goes away. So it's very, very important to have your DHEA levels checked and take it if your levels are not optimum. Okay, isn't it natural to have menopause? People often argue, and the answer is yes, it is. It's also natural to die. That's not the outcome we want, however. By adding natural hormones into the mix, what we're trying to do is prolong what would be our reproductive state. Because if you look at nature, when animals lose their ability to reproduce, they usually just simply die. If you're a praying mantis, the poor male, as soon as he mates and copulates, his head's knocked off. That's not really what I'm talking about here. But other animals that as soon as they have lost their ability to mate, they age very rapidly and they die. So by extending that period of hormonal levels, we hopefully extend our lives. But even more importantly, while they call this life extension medicine, to me it's more importantly to call it quality of life medicine. It makes you feel better on this medicine. I feel much better. Every day is much better than before I took it. So I feel good enough, and almost every woman that has taken these comes to me and says, even if it took 10 years off my life, I would take them, because that's how much better they feel. What does natural mean? We talked about that. To me, natural means identical under a microscope. I don't care about the source or anything else. I care about if the atoms and the molecules are the same. Some people care about it being from a plant. Well, guess what? You get a bonus. These are derived from plants, and they're identical under a microscope. The other value that this has, that you will never get, ever, in standard medicine, is the ability to individualize all of our cases. We don't have any two women on the same formula. They all have different levels of one or more hormones. And that's simply because every woman's different. So to give everyone the McDonald's version of, Premarin 0.625 and Provera 2.5, even if they were natural, is ridiculous, because what if they need a level in between those two? It's not available. And we did talk a little bit about patents and profits, and the reason they turn all these nice, wonderful natural hormones into weird Frankensteinish hormones is so that they can simply profit. Next, we're going to talk about thyroid. And this is what's one of the things that's changing the most greatly in medicine right now. And it's hard to get doctors to make the shift because they're so afraid of liability. But here's what's going on. Doctors typically only test something called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Well, that's not even a thyroid hormone. That's a pituitary hormone. And it stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So if your level of TSH is high, that means it's trying to get your body to produce more thyroid. Your body isn't producing it, so you must be hypothyroid. If it is too low, that would mean that your thyroid was producing too much thyroid hormone, and we need to adjust it that way. Well, sure, that's a useful tool. But the problem is, if you want to know what your thyroid levels are, why don't you test thyroid? And the reason I say this is there are millions of people with normal TSH, normal T4, and T4 is the inactive, or I should say primarily inactive form of thyroid, and it needs to be converted in the periphery in your body to T3 to be active. So what happens is you have a normal TSH, a normal T4, and people do not have normal T3s. Their ability to convert T4 to T3 with the deiodinase enzyme fails. It could fail for a lot of reasons. It could fail from low energy states. It could fail from selenium not being absorbed properly. It could fail from being on other medications. There's a million reasons it could happen. But the fact is, traditional doctors never check free T3, and free T3 is the only hormone that matters in your body. If you want to know, or if you suspect you're low on thyroid, it's a simple test. Take your body temperature. This is the way they used to do it in the old days. Take your body temperature at night, take it in the morning. If you're on average, you're below 98. If you're in this 97.2 range, that means that you have a thyroid issue. Most doctors will say something silly like, well, that's just normal for you. Right, thyroid disease is normal for you. Nobody should be 97.2. 98.6 is what you should be. That's a normal metabolic rate. And if you're not there, we need to supplement thyroid to get you there. So what we have done, because we don't want to cause any liability with physicians, Insurance companies run the world, and they don't like to see you on hormones or thyroid hormones if your levels are quote-unquote normal, meaning T3 has a range of 2.3 to 4.2. So if you're 2.31, you're normal. However, at 2.31, I've never met anyone that felt good. So we like to optimize that and bring you up to 3.9 and still have TSH in the normal range. And in so doing, our patients feel fantastic. That way, we're not taking anyone out of range, or out of the normal range, and we're still keeping them in normal, and yet they feel so much better. So we have to be careful. We walk a straight line, and we have to do things still within the parameters of normal medicine. There's also a huge issue with doctors. They do not check the other thyroid hormones that need to be checked to get a complete picture of what your thyroid and what's going on. They need to check free T3. They need to check something called reverse T3. Reverse T3 is exactly what it sounds like, backwards T3. The problem with it is that it blocks free T3 receptor sites, and it makes it so your thyroid won't work. It happens, your body makes reverse T3 from stressful situations, from a lack of selenium, from a variety of issues. But the fact is, if you have an elevated RT3, then it is a fact that most likely your thyroid is not functioning right, it's not hitting enough receptor sites, and you have essentially hypothyroid symptoms. The other one is thyroid antibodies. Hashimoto's disease is a disease where your body basically attacks its own thyroid. It attacks its own thyroid gland and its own thyroid hormones. So they should be checking 2 types of antibodies in everyone that has a hormone panel. Do they check it? No, they don't. I don't know why. I have no clue. It's like they go through a gambit of tests, and maybe 20 years later they'll check it and take a look at it. We find elevated antibodies in probably 1 out of 3 patients. They don't all qualify for Hashimoto's because technically I believe the parameter is to be 10 times the normal level. But regardless, when you treat these patients with thyroid hormones, they do much better. Another thing we need to mention at this time is that doctors only prescribe Synthroid or levothyroxine. And this is a big problem because Synthroid is simply T4, inactive hormone. It must convert to T3 in the body. Well, you have to have enough deiodinase enzyme to do this. You have to have enough carbohydrates to do this. So low-calorie diets will shut your thyroid down. You have to have sufficient amounts of selenium to do this. There's a variety of things that have to happen to make T4 convert to T3. T3 is not even technically a thyroid hormone, although it's the one that does all the work for the thyroid. Doctors tend to think that throw some T4 at you and your body will take care of the rest. It's not that simple. You do need to know what your T4 level is, but you do need to know for sure what your free T3 level is. Okay. The scammers. What to avoid. Saliva kits. If any of you have tried these hormones before, I'm sure you've been duped and sold a saliva kit. And then you go in and they tell you your levels are great, and you tell them you don't feel good. And then they give you a saliva test kit and say, well, look, see, your levels are great. These saliva kits are bogus. You cross-test this with serum, and your levels will show non-existent. Then their argument becomes, well, it only tests free levels. There's a problem with this. Anytime a hormone hits the blood, it's immediately bound. In fact, it's immediately bound from 98% to 99.3%. So you have to have a bound and an unbound level. So if you do a saliva test and it says that you have a certain level of free thyroid, then you have to have a level of unfree thyroid or estrogen, whatever hormone you pick it. So when we cross-reference some of these patients with serum, we came up with levels that were 0. And that right there condemned saliva kits to the gutter, in my opinion. We refuse to use those. Topical creams and gels. The skin is the largest organ in the body. Its function is to keep things out, not to let things through. Topical gels and creams, when we test them with our correct testing methods, do not work very well. Now, there are a few exceptions. Testosterone tends to work fairly well topically. Progesterone works semi-well. But beyond that, they're fairly useless. Pellet implants. They definitely work. There's no absorption necessary. The problem is you end up with levels that are way beyond physiology, and then they get absorbed, and then you run out in 2 months. They're supposed to last 6 months, and patients need them sooner and sooner. And furthermore, they get hooked on almost a hormonal high that they get from it, and they need their implants sooner and sooner and sooner. And furthermore, they don't even have a progesterone implant to use, so they have to supplement progesterone anyway. And I don't know how many people want to get their skin cut on, loaded up with pellets in a little plastic trocar, shoved back in their body and stitched up every 6 months, but I don't. The dosage form we use has a 25-year track record. It works every time. We have not had a failure. I can prove that with blood work from years and years and years ago. So we guarantee what we do. We promise you that you will get the levels you need. Your symptoms will be relieved. If you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, you'll be told how to get a hold of us. And good luck in your new therapy.